my name is Matt Lim, and we're here to talk about my new book, which
Yes.
I'm absolutely delighted that you've taken an interest in.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to get into the book in a bit, but let's learn a bit about you first, Matt. So what's your career history?
Career history, well, it's been somewhat checkered according to many people, but I left school in the mid-1970s. I got a great desire that my parents were both farmers, both hill farmers mainly in North Derbyshire. They spent most of their life as sheep farmers in North Derbyshire. So as you can imagine, with that sort of a background, Dad was absolutely adamant that one of us, either me or my brother, should carry on farming, and I says, I will. I'm just going to shoot off and do a couple of things for a couple of years. So I joined the army for a couple of years, and I left 41 years later. So it didn't quite work out.
Did he come to support that?
He accepted it. Whether he probably did support it, God rest him. He passed away some years ago now. Whether he'd ever publicly say he supported it would be a different story.
Wow.
But so it was a mix of regular service, reserve service, territorial service. But it kept me busy and out of trouble for many, many years, without a doubt. So yeah.
Okay, and your passion for the forces has remained, as is become clear. I've only met you a few minutes ago, but that's very clear, and that's led to what we're going to talk about today, which is your second book.
Yeah, I think the passion comes from even at home. I remember sitting with my dad in the haystacks at home, and there used to be an elderly fella who'd come in. He looked immaculate, tweed jacket, always wore a tie, and he always walked stooped on a stick. And he told me about being gassed, and as a young 6-year-old, it meant nothing to you.
Wow!
But I was absolutely determined. And then my grandfather, none of my parents, none of the family ever served in the army. So my grandfather talked about what he did when he was in the Home Guard and that. So I think by the time I got to a teenager, I'd got a passion for not military service, but what it was our veterans did and what we achieved through 2 world wars, and that's where it's come from. And I think that's gone forward into the books I've written. My last book was about veterans of World War II, which was very well received. And the new book is Valour, the Victoria Cross and the Lincolnshire Regiment, and that is where the books come from.
So Matt is based in Grantham, aren't you? And yes, the Victoria Cross. Now tell us, first of all, for people who don't know, what is a Victoria Cross?
The Victoria Cross is the highest honour that can be awarded to British and Commonwealth servicemen. It has to be awarded at a level in presence of the enemy. It's awarded without distinction to rank or service. So the great thing about the Victoria Cross, unlike many gallantry medals, is that a private soldier with 6 weeks of service can equally get it as a general can with a lifetime of service. And it has no distinction for rank or anything. It is the highest award that the country can give anybody. So it sits above Orders of the Bath, Orders of Merit. And if you wore medals and you got other medals, it will be the very first medal you would ever wore,
Wow.
which is the highest one.
Wow. And when somebody's selected and awarded a Victoria Cross, is it their superiors that decide that they should receive that?
It's a very long, drawn-out procedure. First of all, it's got to be witnessed, and it's got to have a good, reliable witnesses. And there's elements of the army that you look at, you think, I thought they'd have much more Victoria Crosses than they got. But they're never going to get it because the work they do, particularly our special forces, they don't get the witnesses to see. They operate in those little small teams,
Right.
So nobody knows what they do, so they often lack it. And if you look at the Special Air Service, one Victoria Cross in its entire history, where you think there'd be many more. But it's got to be witnessed. It then goes through various committees through the MOD, and the final decision comes from the Sovereign. It is the Sovereign themselves who decide at the very end of it, is this worthy of it? And we've actually had occasions where it's gone the opposite way. There's a lovely story that comes out of World War II, the Italian campaign, where a company sergeant major attacks a German position on a mountain. And for that, he's awarded the DCM, the Distinguished Conduct Medal, a very worthy gallantry medal. But when the King presents it, he reads the citation out, he gives him his medal. And the King George VI happened to be in Italy a few weeks' time, and he meets the commander of all the British forces in Italy. And he says, I gave a fella a DCM the other week. I'd like you to have a look at it and just see if it's absolutely what he deserves. And so General, or Field Marshal he was by then, Field Marshal Alexander goes back to the King and he says, King, you're right. It's a Victoria Cross.
Wow.
So he had his DCM removed and he had to go back to the palace, and this time he gets awarded a Victoria Cross. So it does go both ways, and and the monarch does take an interest in this, and it's not what you see on TV, that they turn up the day, they pin the medal on. There is a lot of background work between the senior elements of our MOD before he actually gets awarded it.
Fantastic. Now, your book, the title of it?
It's called Valour, the Victoria Cross and the Lincolnshire Regiment.
So it focuses on the Lincolnshire Regiment and the stories of 10 men.
Yeah, the background of the book must be 4, maybe even 5 years ago. I sat doing some research on a story of a Victoria Cross for one of the tours I was doing. And at the end of it, I thought, oh, he's a Lincolnshire Regiment lad. And I hadn't sort of appreciated us doing it. And then only a matter of days later, I was finishing off another piece, which was a media piece for a third party. And again, it was a Lincolnshire Regiment lad. And it just triggered in my mind, just out of pure curiosity, so how many Victoria Crosses have the Lincolnshire Regiment or its predecessors actually got? And it's 10. Wow. 10 Victoria Crosses in its 275-year history.
And Matt thought, that's a good amount for a book.
Well, it was one of those things. We probably all do it with everything we do in life. You write a note and it sits on a shelf for ages of, here's an idea of something to do in the future. And it'd be probably 18 months ago, I thought, I really ought to get on with this, didn't I? And I started, and it took me about 8 months to draw all the research pieces together and look at everything that was available. In that time, I had a visit to Italy, so I managed to photograph one of the graves, travelled all over the UK, picking up various pieces. And I think it was probably February, maybe March of this year. I thought, yeah, let's get on with it. And chapter at a time, we've done it. So it starts off with a good description of what the Victoria Cross is. And then we've got in detail the 10 recipients of the Victoria Cross of the Lincolnshire Regiment.
And we're not going to spoil the book because we want people to get hold of that book. But we do want you to tell us some of the stories today, Matt.
Okay, well, all 10 are fascinating. They're all fascinating in different ways. There's one in there, he's the son of a general, and he gets his Victoria Cross during the Indian Mutiny. And it's an unbelievable story. We've got a private soldier in there who gets his Victoria Cross again in the Indian Mutiny because he goes out at night on his own and he rescues somebody whose house is surrounded by the mutineers and they're burning the house down, and he goes in and rescues them. And if that isn't a story enough, he then comes out of the army and he's buried in a pauper's grave because nobody knows what he did. And he comes from Liverpool. It was when it was the 10th Regiment of Foot. He ends up in a pauper's grave because he can't find work. So he ends up in the workhouse in Liverpool. He dies of pneumonia at the age of less than 40. He dies and he's put in a pauper's grave, and his grave goes unmarked for 100 years.
Wow.
Then his grave is marked, but it's not until the 1890s, over 100 years after his death, before it's marked. But the two that I wouldn't say...
that story, the story was uncovered at some point then?
We always knew about it.
But you say he was, people didn't know who he was.
No.
So they just, right.
Yeah.
They knew the story had happened, but they didn't know, right,
but
okay.
I think the mix was, we knew that John Kirk had got a Victoria Cross,
right,
and we knew that he died in the workhouse. But we hadn't realised he'd been buried in Anfield Cemetery.
Wow.
And I think there was a project going on about 30, 40 years ago now, and they were looking at some of the paupers' graves there because they, understandably, there is an organisation called the Friends of Anfield Cemetery, and they were worried that these graves had got no markers on them.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it dawned on them that this John Evans was actually a Victoria Cross.
Wow. Do you know what? It already sounds like each of these 10 chapters could become a film in their own right. Every story is amazing.
There is one that I worked on, and it's Henry Havelock, Lieutenant Henry Havelock, the son of General Havelock, who again, and it's a Victoria Cross awarded during the Indian Mutiny. His was unbelievable because he goes to rescue, and the story of North India in the 1857, 1858. How he goes to rescue a daughter of a general, and then there was a massacre, and she was the one who survived. Nobody knows what happened to her, and she disappears, and there's rumours going around it. But about 50 years later, a missionary and a doctor are called to a dying woman of English descent, and their words were, she spoke particularly well, admitted to being the daughter of the general who'd been massacred, and said that 50 years earlier she'd married the Indian soldier who rescued her and lived with her for the rest of her life. So These, and that is just a little twist in the
Yeah.
book. It's not even a story in the book. It's one of the little tiny twists that come out of the book there. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Tell me somebody else's story in brief, obviously,
Yeah.
Matt. Because again, we want everybody to get hold of this book.
I think one of the ones that is the most moving story in there is Theodore Hardy. Theodore Hardy, born in 1859, and basically born into a very poor family. He's still an infant when his father passes away. His mother has already been widowed once, and she struggles to look after him and his brothers. There ends up 7 brothers and sisters and stepbrothers in the siblings. Eventually we go through, he gets married, and let's come forward now to 1914. His wife Florence dies, and if there's a love of his life, it's Florence. They're absolutely devoted to each other. By this time, she'd been unwell for quite a while. He'd worked as a schoolmaster at a rather large grammar school in Lancashire. And then for time and to help his Florence, who's now quite ill, he goes as a village vicar, a little tiny parish called Hutton Roof, right up in Westmoreland. And he actually sits there and becomes a village vicar. But in the summer of 1914, she sadly passes away. That morning, he actually goes down to the church, as he did every morning. Side of the church was a schoolroom, which they both worked in and helped in. And then when he went back to the vicarage, she'd actually passed away. She's buried 3 days later and still is in Hutton Roof. And I visited there just a couple of 3 months ago. He's absolutely bereft, and he volunteers as the World War I breaks out. He's already 52 years old. And he says, I'll be a padre. And
52, and he joins up. Right.
He offers to join. And they said, no, first of all, you're short-sighted. And it was very short, probably 5'2", 5'3". And he said, nope, there's no way we're having you. He hammers into them and he applies, and he's rejected every time. He goes and does a first aid course. He does a stretcher bearers course. And eventually, in 1916, they agree to take him. And he goes and he ends up as the padre to the 8th Battalion of the Lincolnshire Regiment. Right at the height of the Battle of Arras, he then serves, and let me get the figures absolutely right, between June 1917 and March 1918, he's awarded the Distinguished Service Order, the Military Cross, and then finally the Victoria Cross.
Wow.
3 of the highest decorations that can be awarded to anybody. And this is a vicar on the front line. He never carries a rifle. He's never fired a shot in anger. And all he's done is helped soldiers. He's written letters for the invalids. He's helped them. And when you're a soldier, whether you've faith or no faith, chat with a padre is one of the most rewarding things you can do. It is an unbelievable thing.
Really?
And then finally, sadly, just 3 weeks before the end of the war, again, he's crossing a river. He's going out again to help lads from the Lincolnshire Regiment, and he's hit by machine gun fire, and he dies a week later, in 3 weeks before the end of the war, and 3 days before his 55th birthday.
Wow, that's quite the story, isn't it? Yeah. So a vicar on the front line, that's got to be fairly unique, hasn't it?
Well, no. I mean, there was approaching 5,000 padres during World War I.
Really?
170, almost 180 are actually killed in the trenches. So, it isn't a rarity. And 3 of them are awarded the Victoria Cross. So he's not on his own, but it is such a moving story of his age. And actually, Theodore Hardy is the highest awarded, the most decorated vicar or non-combatant of World War I.
So tell us another story, Matt.
Okay. Well, if Theodore Hardy is, without a shadow of a doubt, the oldest of the 10 recipients of the Victoria Cross, then John Brunt is the youngest. Shouldn't have even been in the Lincolns. 22 years old when he's awarded the Victoria Cross. Born in Shropshire. He joins as a private soldier into a West Kent regiment. He applies then for his cadetship. He's promoted to a corporal almost instantly. Applies to go to Sandhurst. He's accepted, does exceptionally well. And he's going out to join his own regiment, which is actually the Foresters, the Sherwood Foresters, not the Lincolns. And on the boat going out to North Africa, where he starts in the North Africa campaign, he meets a friend, and I don't know how it happened, and nobody's ever worked it out, but he gets off the boat as a Lincoln and serves with the Lincolns through North Africa, the tail end of the North Africa campaign. He then goes through the Sicily campaign, Operation Husky, and eventually he gets into Italy. He's awarded, not absolutely uniquely, but to give you some idea, in not much more than a year, the Military Cross for a raid where, as a platoon commander, he actually attacks a German and takes massive number of casualties. Sorry, he inflicts casualties and takes a number of prisoners, and then he gets his Victoria Cross, 9th of December 1944, at a place called Faenza, right up in northern Italy, not far from Bologna. And he basically, the Germans counterattack, and him on his own with a handful of guys push back the Germans and stop this counterattack, and he holds the line and survives it. Next morning, feeling good about it, he's having breakfast. Probably the first hot meal he's had for 4 or 5 days, and he sits there and he chats with everybody, what a good day it's going to be. And a random stray mortar round lands at his feet and kills him instantly. 3 days before his, or
Wow.
3 days after his 22nd birthday.
These are incredible stories.
Yeah.
Brave people who met their end in often. I mean, a story like that, he thinks I'm okay.
Yeah. John Brunt is quite unique. He's very young at 22, and I last year I was in Italy and I thought I'm going to go and visit. So I caught a train. I was in Bologna. I caught the train down to Faenza, got in a taxi and got out to the Commonwealth War graves, which were immaculately kept. And there he was, got a photograph in the book of his grave, and spent my time there, put a poppy cross into it. And as I put the poppy cross in, beautiful morning, spring morning, surrounded by olive groves. And I was just having that moment of just what you went through and sort of admiring what he achieved. And in the corner of my eye, I caught somebody coming towards me, elderly fella, stooped on a stick, nodded to me. And then he come across to me, I went across to him, and suddenly I realised that he spoke about as much English as I spoke Italian. But it took us about 20 minutes, and it was absolutely marvellous that he told me that the family had lived very close by. His father had told him about the battles of Faenza, which was the ones that John Brunt was involved in. His father told him about the cemetery itself being built, and he had worked most of his life to help just keep the cemetery tidy, visit it on a regular basis. At that point, my taxi come to get me back to the station and get me back to my hotel for the night. And as I walked away, I just saw this elderly gent slowly disappearing between the gravestones, walking away from me. And I got into the taxi, and I think I almost had a tear in my eye to finish a visit like that with a elderly gent like that. But I have one regret. I didn't ask his name.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
You wrapped up in the conversation, and then you got driving away thinking, didn't get his name.
Yeah.
Incredible story. Wow. This book sounds good. When and how can people get hold of it?
Okay, the book will be published. It'll be available online from the 1st of October at the Great British Bookshop.
And then I'm sure Netflix will be in touch, and a 10-part series, each episode being a story from your book, I think would be wonderful for your future, Matt. And you don't just do the books. Tell us a bit about the Battlefield Tours.
Oh, the Battlefield Tours. These started, I think these started 40 odd years ago. I remember when you're a young officer, I don't know if they still do it now, but when you get commissioned as a young officer, you get taken on a thing called a staff ride. And you basically visit a battlefield. And the best way to understand a battle is to walk the field of battle. And by understanding the ground, looking at what's there, it's so much easier to understand the tactics and how we did it. And it's the easiest way to learn. And we used to get shipped over to France, and we'd look at battles. And then once you got told by a historian what happened and how it worked and everything, they'd turn to you and say, would you do anything different today with modern weapons? And then you go in, and it's not a history lesson, it's a teaching lesson. And it absolutely fascinated me. And I did one of these on the Battle of the Somme. And I come running home because the name of a particular village on the Somme is called Thiepval. It's where the massive memorial is to the missing of the Somme, Thiepval Memorial. And I thought, why do I know that name, Thiepval? And I couldn't think what it was. And then I remembered that it was a middle name of one of these gents that I met as a young lad.
Wow. Okay.
Many, I mean, 2 decades earlier. And so I went home to mum and dad. Next time I was on leave, I went running home to mum and dad, and I said, I forgot the guy's first name, but I asked him. He said, no, he passed away a few months ago. And I went to see his sister. He never married. He was with his sister. And he said, no, Thiepval was his middle name because his older brother was killed at Thiepval, and he was named after it. And that was one of the early links that brought me from my childhood into the Battlefield Tours. So I was absolutely wrapped up in this. I think 2 weekends later, I got in my car, and this was before the Channel Tunnel. There was about 3 ferries a day. And off I went to France. And then I realised that you can't just nip to France and do this. You've got to put some planning into it. I'd got no maps, I got no nothing. But I managed to find some of the spots we'd been to the week before. I sat in a corner cafe in a little village, having a glass of wine and just thinking, this is just unbelievable. And eventually I got married, and the good lady wife got dragged over to the battlefields. And there was that point where you developed it. You got the maps, you got the history, you got the books, you got all the stories in place. And I remember being in a village pub one day, and they said, we wouldn't mind going with you. And cut a long story short, after a couple of years, you realise that you were doing all the work, and suddenly this hobby became a business. And that's where it broke through. Today, we have some very moving days. If you've got a minute, one of the most moving stories is, it must have been 10 or 15 years ago. In the spring, I got a phone call from a family over Birmingham way, and they'd got an elderly uncle whose, again, his elderly brother had passed away on the Somme. They knew nothing about it, but the family had never visited the grave, didn't know where it was. So we did the research, and eventually, the story goes, we met them in the hotel. They made their own way there. He was very, very frail. Following day, they just wanted this one day. In the morning, we worked out where the elderly brother had fought with his battalion. We found the grave, showed them where the grave was. I'd got them a wreath, and I let them have their little bit of time. And yeah, there was tears, and understandably there was tears. You know, it's a very moving moment, that is. And we made our way. They went home, and I got a phone call 10 days later, 3 days after he'd seen his brother, having wanted to visit him all his life, he passed away.
Wow. I've said wow so many times during this chat. Honestly, these are incredible stories. Yeah. And so you think, you know, something inside him just wanted to get to that moment.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I put the phone down and I started crying, but it felt so rewarding that the one thing that this elderly gent wanted to do, he wanted to go and find his brother, and we did it for him.
Incredible. So people can look for relatives, or just go on these battlefield tours to find, to look if they're interested in the history of places. And come on, you've got a website, haven't you, Matt?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the website is mlbft.co.uk, Matt Lim Battlefield Tours, mlbft.co.uk, and on there is the details of it. We don't do the bus. We don't do the come and jump on my bus and we'll take you for 3 days. Everything we do is very bespoke. So it is, I want to go and find my grandfather. So many people have said, I went on a battlefield tour. I wanted to go and see who my grandfather was. But the tours that they go on, the 3 days ones, it's museums, memorials, and then they come back.
I see.
They don't dig down into that, you know, it's going to be a field in the back of a farm that they'll need to visit to find out where their grandfather was. And they don't do that final detail. So it's a bit like the package holiday against the bespoke booking of going on a trip somewhere.
Sure.
So, yeah.
I can see the joy of it. Okay, well, Matt, fascinating stuff. Honestly, best of luck with the book. It's on the screen again now, so people can get that, and along with where they can get it from. And head to Battlefield Tours, Matt's website, and you can go on one of his little adventures as well and check out the history for yourself. Matt, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.